I'll introduce myself. My name is Samara, and I am one of the coordinators of the Housing First Europe Hub. And I'm coming to you live from my living room in Brussels. So it's still pandemic season here in Belgium, so we're working from home still. But we're delighted to be able to bring you another installment in our unlimited series of these webinars, where we use the opportunity to bring people working in Housing First together to talk about some of the challenges they may be having, some of the solutions they may have found, and to really engage with each other and with you, the participants, on some of these day-to-day topics that we are all trying to overcome in various parts of Europe and beyond. I'll say maybe a little bit about the Housing First Europe Hub. The Hub is a partnership of organizations, cities, ministries, researchers, and housing providers. We came together in 2016 to really support and promote this idea that Housing First can help to unlock systems change and to really rethink how homelessness and housing services are delivered while applying those very important core principles of Housing First. And so over the past 5+ years now, we've developed training programs, research, advocacy tools, and also this approach of working in a community of practice where we can bring people together from different backgrounds, but often facing similar challenges, whether it's frontline workers or managers, housing providers, people working with young people, etc. So these webinars, as well as all of our other material, is available on our website, which you can find probably in the invitation or the registration form that you used to join us today. And I'll maybe just take 1 second at the end to say that we're organizing our very first conference. And this will take place on the 28th and 29th of March in Madrid. The focus is really on how do we scale up Housing First, and how do we help to move more in a direction that Housing First helps to inform all of our homelessness and housing policies. The registrations for the conference have just opened this week, and you can find all that information on our website. Maybe I'll just say a couple of housekeeping bits. As I said, maybe at the top, we can't see you, but we can interact with you and respond to your questions in the chat. So please use the chat to ask questions throughout the session, as panelists will be able to look there, and we'll be able to make sure that the speakers see those questions when it comes time for our discussion. And please do, feel free, let us know where you're tuning in from, and don't hesitate to share your comments and your questions in the chat. I will hand over now to Niall, who's going to host and moderate the session, and I'm really looking forward to this morning's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samara. You're very welcome, everybody, to another webinar. This is our first session 2022, and today's topic is recruitment in Housing First. We're going to have 3 speakers today. We're going to have Antii, Gary, and Liz, and I will introduce each of them before they do their presentation. Just a reminder, as Samara said, we will have questions at the end for all 3 presentations. And if you do have a question and you'd like it to be put forward, please put it in the chat and we will pick it up as we go. So without further ado, first up we have Antii Martikainen. And Antii is working with the Foundation of Salvation Army in Finland, and he has been in a managerial position there since 2011. Prior to joining the Salvation Army, he has 10 years work experience in areas such as child welfare as a specialist education teacher, specialist needs youth worker, and Antii holds a master's in social policy from the University of Applied Sciences. So I'm now going to hand you over to Antii, who's going to put up his presentation and go through it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here. I hope everyone is fine all across Europe. Now I try to start my presentation. Salvation Army loves history, and we have to tell something about our history. And our place is in the capital area near to Helsinki. There is 3 supported housing units in Helsinki area. Well, this one where I'm working is Alppikatu. Then there's in Helsinki also Pitäjänmäki, 212 places, and it started 2011. And then Espoo city area, there is Väinölä, 35 places. And then near this Alppikatu unit, actually in the same block, there is this Kastrenikatu unit, which offers temporary housing for 53 people, 12 for women and rest are for men. And then there is in a Turku area, different city, maybe the 3rd biggest city in Finland, there is Gathered Support Housing Unit. There is 100 places. And these are the Salvation Army housing places in Finland. About this building, this is pretty famous place in Helsinki. It was started in 1937, and in the 1950s there was more than 500, mostly men, homeless people were sleeping in this building. There was a renovation in 70s, and after that the shelter's capacity reduced to 276 beds. And we go with that until 2010. And then was the new start because the Helsinki city decided to shut down all the shelters and invest in a housing first similar solutions. And it takes almost 2 years to renovate this big building for these kind of 81 apartment housing for units. And we started this new operations in December 2012, when all 85 residents signed a permanent rental agreement. And it was, of course, a really nice thing. And yeah, about Alppikatu, there is our basic task. We provide individual and community support in housing, everyday life, and secure the future. And that's the whole thing why we are over here, and we are trying to remember that every day. And we have an agreement with Helsinki City, and now we have 3 more years contracts going on right now. With 89 people, there is 22 people who have education in social work are working in this building. 8 instructors or supervisors are working 24/7, and other people are working in daytime in 5 days a week. And of course, we have to hire some new people now and then. And now about this, because it's really important for us that we are using these community work elements. We try to do that. Our starting point is that our residents are involved in every planning and every implementation of the activities which are working over here. Which, if we move something, if we change something, we try to get everyone together and let's talk about it, and then make the moves or things, changes. Yeah. And one thing is, of course, that when we are choosing new employees over here, we try to listen to our residents. And when we are choosing new employees over here, we make group interviews, and we invite 4 or 6 candidates, and there is 3 to 5 interviewers, and there is 1 or 2 tenants, residents in that interview group. And one of the staff members will be the moderator, who is taking care that everything is going we are planning that and taking care that time is not going too far and things like that. We are not saying who we are when we are in a group. We are interviewers. We don't introduce ourselves. They don't know who is tenant or who is staff member. And we are doing this introducing after the whole event. And we try to make sure that the resident participant in the interview is chosen by his own floor supervisor. He is or she is choosing this employee for himself or herself. They are making these tasks all the time, and then we are changing these interview team comments and reflects what we have heard and what the candidates have said. They are making, for example, plan for the task is to case for the employees are that what are you going to do with this kind of person? His problems are this and this and this. Make a plan. What kind of things how do you start to work with him or her? And then we listen to these things, and then we give some comments and reflects how it goes and maybe what else we want to hear. I think there is these positive surprises going on when there is tenants involved. Almost everything has happened and can happen. Maybe their phone is ringing, they are answering to it, and they are leaving from the room and come back, or sometimes they are asking every kind of questions from the candidates. And it's nice to see how the candidates are acting and react for this kind of different behavior. And I can be sure that if they are not acting right, you are not going to be chosen to work, because you really have to do and act in a different kind of situation with different kind of persons, and sometimes they get provoked and so on, and it's not a good thing. But you can see much more over there when the residents are, and they are. It's nice to see these things. I have to say that when we started these group interviews with the residents, I was like, oh, how it goes, and I don't know. It's really difficult, but I think we have only positive things to say about these group interviews with tenants, because it really helps in many ways to this choosing process and whole community also. When the event is over, we let them go, and then we review and evaluate each candidate. And then the residents are, I can say that they are seeing different kind of a new perspective about candidates. There could be signs that we never saw, and they are saying that, and maybe they are thinking just like opposite what we have thinking, like staff members are thinking. And finally, interviewers, we give points to each interview, and all the points are equal. And then who gets most posts, usually we choose that one to be our new staff member. And yeah, sometimes there could be some changes, but normally it goes like that. And we talk long time after this whole event. If there is like two really good candidates, maybe we invite her or him to come back and talk again, but normally that's enough about this. And of course, there is a lot of positive impacts on residents. They are strengthening their self-confidence, sense of meaning, and strengthening of the whole community at the same time. They are proud to be in these kind of things and choosing new employees for the whole unit and for their neighbors and friends and for themselves. And many times they are saying that afterwards that Antii isn't that Maria over there? She's really good supervisor, and I knew it. I was the one who chose her to work over here, and I think it's really good thing. And we are continuing this kind of recruiting system over here.
Antii, that's the end of your presentation, is it? That's the
Yeah.
last slide. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you very, very much. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to Gary's presentation, and we will save some of the questions maybe in relation to your presentation until the end, Antii, if that's okay.
Yep.
And I'm sure there will be some that's a totally different way of recruiting. So really, really well done to you guys for doing that. So without further ado, I will introduce Gary Niall. And for those people who have been to these webinars before, you'll remember, recognize Gary. He's presented here before, and he's a member of the group that we work on in terms of Housing First for All. He's been a member of that for the last number of years. Gary's working in the homeless sector with Rock Trust for over 20 years. And in that time, he's worked across the frontline service and also in the operations management. And he looks particularly at supported housing, visiting support, and Housing First for Youth Services. More recently, Gary's joined the senior management team at Rock Trust as an assistant director. So without further ado, I'm going to let Gary kick off with his presentation. So thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Niall. So for those of you who don't know, Rock Trust is a youth homelessness charity, and we work across various locations across Scotland. And increasingly, our services are moving towards much more preventative models to actually prevent young people becoming homeless in the first place. But when homelessness can't be avoided, the focus of our services is on ensuring that homelessness is brief, that it's rare, and that it's non-recurring. So, and I'll apologise in advance, I never pass up an opportunity to bang on about why youth-specific services are really key to ending youth homelessness, and so I will touch on that today. And I please want to make it clear that I'm not saying that adult services can't help young people move on from homelessness, because I know that there are services out there who are not youth-specific services, but who are doing an amazing job, and they're a credit to everyone. But look, and I'm not sure that Hollywood is necessarily a realistic representation of real life, but in the movies, when a gangster gets shot up in a gunfight and they can't go to hospital, they're normally taken to a vet or an animal doctor, and it generally works out okay. The gangster gets patched up and makes a full recovery. But I'd like to put it on record today, and this is being recorded, if I get shot up in a gunfight, I would quite like to be taken to a hospital, or at the very least, I'd like to be taken to a human doctor. And I think that young people deserve the same when it comes to homelessness services and when it comes to Housing First for Youth. So I'm going to try and back up that claim with a little bit on why young people are different to older adults. And then I'll go on to cover a Rock Trust approach to recruitment just generally, and then try and spend a little bit of time at the end on some of our learning from Housing First for Youth services. So when we talk about what makes a good youth worker, it's really important for us to stress the differences between young people and older adults. And so to set the scene, I'm going to kick off with a case study. And this is a real person. I've known this person for several years. So she is a young woman. She makes lots of demands on those involved in providing care and support. And she'll often play one supporter off against another. She engages in support, but she engages in a variety of often challenging ways. And at times, she can be very demanding. At other times, she can be avoidant and very self-reliant. She displays a range of challenging behaviours, and it's fair to say that she's prone to outbursts. She can be crying one minute, laughing the next. She has a very volatile relationship with her friends, and people who are involved in providing care to this young woman speak about the fact that she can evoke some very strong extremes of emotion in carers. Now, I imagine that probably sounds familiar to a lot of the people on this call, and I wouldn't normally breach confidentiality, but I have checked, and I do have consent from this young woman to share. And so I'd like you to meet Molly. This is Molly, age 9. Molly is my daughter. And since she was born, I've read lots of books. I've spoken to friends and family. I've watched TV, I've read newspaper articles, and I've been on countless training courses. And gradually, I've come to understand that being a parent is a tough gig, but the rewards generally make it worthwhile. So I'm guessing that many people will recognise some, maybe even all of the behaviours that are described there in older adults. And you'll know that many of those kind of behaviours are the result of past trauma. So many of the young people that we work with at Rock Trust have experienced trauma in their lives, but not all of them. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that we should expect this behaviour from all young people. It's not always at the extreme end of the scale, but I think we should be clear that it's totally predictable and normal adolescent behaviour. And so we should design our youth services to respond in ways that take that into consideration, with staff who've got the right skills to work with young people where they're at. It often feels to me that young people are expected, often encouraged really, to act out a little bit, to make mistakes, to experiment with stuff, to find themselves, go on a gap year, you know, whatever it is. But often the young people who we work with at Rock Trust who are facing extremely challenging situations, they're almost expected to grow up overnight. And if they dare to do any of that normal teenage stuff, it's almost suggested they're considered to be part of the problem. So a quote here for you. So the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect. Blah, de, blah, de, blah. I'm sure you've heard this kind of thing a million times before. And this could easily come from the letters page in the Daily Mail in the UK today, but it hasn't come from there. It's actually attributed to Socrates, not the football player, the ancient Socrates, who was kicking about 2,500 years ago. So where am I going with this? Well, my point is, adults have been misunderstanding the minds and the behaviours of young people for thousands of years, and they continue to do so to this day. So when we think about the skills and knowledge that a youth worker needs, it's really quite simple. They need experience working with young people on their level, and they need an understanding that young people are at a very specific stage of social, emotional, and physical development, just like Molly was on the previous slide. So what does a young person need from a support worker? So if you're recruiting, I would really encourage you to look for people who can talk about how they've recognised some of the potential barriers that are shown on the slide here, and talk about how they've adapted their approach to develop positive relations with those young people and how they've supported young people to make a positive transition to adulthood. So in youth work, and especially in Housing First for Youth, it's really important that we don't get so caught up in supporting young people with the transition to independence that we forget the most basic thing, that the focus really is on a healthy transition to adulthood. And look, hopefully that includes a healthy interdependence on formal and informal supports, because truly, who among us is truly independent? I hope that we all depend on other people for some things in our life, and that's the way it should be. So in terms of Rock Trust's recruitment over the years, we've now moved away from asking candidates scenario questions, which is the sort of scenario that I was in when I first started going for interviews in the social care sector. So we've moved away from the what would you do if this happened, what would you do if that happened type scenario. Because I think even with minimal preparation, I think it's maybe quite easy for candidates to do a bit of research and probably be quite confident what the correct response for that kind of question should be. So we've now moved to using competency-based questioning. And so we'll ask a candidate to share an example from their professional or their personal life. And it should be an example that shows how their personality or their skills or their competencies have helped them to succeed in a task or a particular piece of work. So, for example, we might ask a candidate to tell us about a time they've worked with a young person who was difficult to engage. And to help candidates and also to help ourselves as interviewers get the most from those questions, we will follow up those initial questions with lots of drill down questions. So again, for example, that might be, we might ask, who else did you involve in this work? What were the biggest challenges and how did you overcome those challenges? And we also think it's really important. I was glad that Antii mentioned it as well, that that's a practice that they're keen to involve, is that we like to involve young people in our recruitment activities. And so we can do that in a number of ways. Young people form part of our formal interview panel, or they can also create their own questions and have their own separate interview panel. However you're going to approach that, I think there are two rules that are really important. So the young person's score must carry the same weight as the other panel members. And there have actually been lots of times at Rock Trust where the young person's scores have actually swung a decision in a particular candidate's favour. And I think when that happens, and I know that Antii touched on that as well, I think the young people have seen something in a candidate that we might have missed, or we might have missed something in some of the candidates that the young people have picked up on. And I think you really can't overlook that. I think that's very, very powerful and important. If you're going to involve young people really need to be fully supported. And so when we involve young people in recruitment, we always identify an experienced support worker to spend some time with the young people, both pre and post interview, just to make sure that they feel really well prepared, that they feel supported throughout, and that they've got a chance to fully debrief at the end of the process. And it was an unexpected outcome, but many young people have fed back to us that being involved in an interview panelist has really been massively helpful and beneficial for them when they've gone on to have an interview themselves, which is fantastic. Recently, we've introduced a value-based exercise. And so candidates now coming into Rock Trust for an interview are asked to take part in a values exercise. So they're asked to come prepared to spend the first 5 or 10 minutes of the interview just chatting about how they live our organisational values and their own personal or professional lives. So this part of the interview is not scored, but it's a really good way to help candidates relax. And we've had some really positive feedback from candidates. So the kind of things that people said is that it really helped create a really good first impression of the Rock Trust as an organisation. And it made them feel really safe and really relaxed, sort of going into that really stressful interview environment. So I guess if you wanted to sum up how we're trying to approach recruitment now at Rock Trust, we describe it as trying to take a trauma-informed approach to recruitment. And if you want to do a quick Google search for that, Dr. Karen Treisman's done some really interesting work on that. And it's like most of these things, it's not rocket science, it's quite straightforward stuff, but quite impactful. So it's simple things that we do, like make sure people know exactly where to come, making sure people know what to wear. You know, if we are doing an interview, we'll generally be dressed smart casual, a shirt and jeans and a pair of trainers, sometimes even a t-shirt and jeans and trainers. So we explain to people that's how we'll be dressed, and we encourage them to wear whatever they feel comfortable in. There's nothing worse than a candidate turning up all suited and booted and feeling totally overdressed. Unless they want to, of course. Make sure we provide lots of water. And as someone who started off an interview once by spilling a glass of water all over the table, I can say that it's also a good idea to have some paper towels and napkins within easy reach. Not the best start for an interview. I would also encourage you to consider sharing some of the questions with candidates in advance of the interview. That can be days in advance or even 15, 20 minutes in advance. I think that can really help people gather their thoughts and start to have a think about choosing the best and the strongest examples to use in the interview to give the very best account of themselves as possible. We also ask candidates for feedback at the end of an interview. And I think that works really well on a few fronts, really. I think it helps candidates feel that their opinions are valued, and they are, of course they were valued, but for us, I think it really helps us to just constantly improve how we ourselves are conducting interviews. And we always, and I think this is probably the most important thing, we always tell candidates when they should expect to find out the outcome, and we always make sure that we stick to those deadlines. There's really nothing worse, and I can say this from personal experience, there's nothing worse on waiting for that telephone call for hours, and in fact, sometimes even days. So we try to avoid that at all costs. So after an interview, a manager will contact all of the candidates by telephone and explain the outcome. And at that point, they'll provide some brief feedback. So we'll try and focus on some of the strengths that we observed during the interview, but we'll also try and offer some suggestions for areas where candidates would maybe like to consider some development. In addition to that, we also offer and we encourage all candidates to come back to us and seek more detailed feedback, especially if the candidates have been unsuccessful. And this trauma-informed approach extends to the way that we approach induction as well. So we've worked really hard over the last few years to try and make inductions fun's probably taken it a bit far, but meaningful and a bit more light-hearted. Some of the things that we've changed over the years, or the last couple of years, is we've tried to introduce a range of different materials and training tools for new staff to work through during those first few weeks. I think historically we just hand people a massive pile of ring binder folders full of documents and policies and procedures and ask them to work through it, and it's not the best start, really. So we try to be a bit creative and use lots of interactive, and especially during COVID, we've been forced to use a lot of interactive stuff, but really quite conscious that if we can get it right in those first few weeks, then that makes a big difference. Another simple thing we've done that's been very effective is we've created bios for all new employees, and we'll share those bios with all the staff prior to someone's first day. And I think it just helps ease that introduction and makes people feel that bit more kind of confident, and maybe helps people feel they know people that bit quicker. And one absolutely brilliant idea is to have your team sign a welcome card for a new member of staff. So I imagine it's universal, although when someone leaves their job, everyone signs a card and wishes them well and says goodbye. But this is a really effective way of sending out a really warm, welcoming vibe to someone when they're joining a team. And of course, it's almost free. It doesn't cost the earth, the cost of a card. So in terms of our learning from Housing First for Youth, I wanted to touch on internal candidates. I think it's always tempting to try and recruit internally, but I think I would suggest that you approach that with some caution. We have recruited some staff internally for Housing First, but we've also had some brilliant staff who were absolutely at the top of their game working in other services, but who probably really would have struggled with the demands of Housing First. And so we will advertise all Housing First vacancies internally in the first instance, and any prospective candidates will go through exactly the same process as an external candidate would go through, just to ensure that we get the right person for the job. We're very fortunate at Rock Trust to have a really incredible partner in the shape of Almond Housing Association. So Almond helped us set up our initial Housing First pilot project by providing the accommodation. And they've been really heavily involved in our interview panels for most of the recruitment we've done in Housing First. And I think it's interesting, the skills and the strength that they are looking for in a Housing First worker, they're not a million miles away from the ones that we're looking for. But I think that little difference and that slight different angle that they're coming from has really been a massive benefit for us and for them. And their expertise has really helped us to recruit Housing First workers that don't only deliver for young people, but they also can work really effectively with partners. And so if you have got good partners like that, I'd really encourage you to involve them, if you can, in the recruitment process. And it's really important to spend time thinking about exactly what skills and strengths you're looking for in a worker. So for us, it was a background in youth work, it was knowledge of trauma and ACEs and psychologically informed environments, and it was someone who had the right values and that whatever it takes approach. But I think the learning that I've had is is to be able to assess the extent of someone's practical experience versus their theoretical knowledge. So I'll give you an example. We recruited a terrific Housing First worker who had lots of experience actually working with young people, and her academic knowledge of trauma and adolescent development was absolutely second to none. She interviewed extremely well, and we were absolutely delighted when she accepted the role. But personally, what I hadn't considered was that although she did have a lot of experience working with young people, this was in a very different setting to Housing First, and she'd never actually experienced a young person being extremely challenging and aggressive. So that sort of distressed and angry and all those emotions, when those were directed at her in her role, she found that incredibly challenging, and it really, really knocked her confidence. Now, we were able to address that through support and training, but ideally I'd have preferred to have done all that during induction before she'd actually had to endure that experience in practice. So it highlighted to me that a questionnaire interview that would have been really helpful would have been a question that explored how candidates dealt with that kind of behaviour, both in terms of how they approached it with a young person, but also their own resilience and their own coping strategies and their own self-care routines. I think that would have been really helpful. Which brings us back again to induction and training. So, you know, let's be realistic, it might not always be possible to recruit staff who have experience working with your specific client group, and that doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Despite all the progress we think we've made in recruitment over the years, there's one thing as an organisation that Rock Trust keep coming back to, and that's our values. So if someone's got the resilience and the right values and that whatever it takes attitude, and if they're really driven to work in Housing First, let's be honest, they're 90% there. We can train them and we can upskill them very, very quickly. So I think that still, despite everything I've said, remains the most important thing. So that's all from me. These are my contact details. I hope this has been useful. I'm happy if anyone wants to speak about this or any other topic offline, give me a call. Please follow Rock Trust on Twitter, and if you'll indulge me, follow me on Twitter as well. That sounds a bit desperate, and it is. But seriously, thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Gary. That's great. And brilliant presentation. Well done. Plenty to think about. Next up is Liz Litter, and Liz is Service Manager for the Housing First Consortium in Glasgow. Liz has worked in homelessness for the past 20 years, and Housing First has been Liz's passion since 2013 when she joined Turning Point in Scotland. She's part of a team that's developing the pioneering Housing First service in Glasgow, and has been an active member on the Housing First European Hub since its inception. So I'm going to hand over to Liz for her presentation, please.
Hi, folks. I wish I could say it's nice to meet you all, but I'll say it anyway. I'm currently wandering around a university building, trying to find a space where I can talk to you. And every time I find somewhere, I need to move. However, I'm just going to persevere where I am now. So here we go. So I'm just going to do the presentation as it is, okay? So obviously it's about our recruitment and Housing First. And we have, I believe, suffered the same sort of issues that you have in Europe. And in fact, I think everywhere, that there are really so few people applying for jobs now. And we have noticed that that's been really significant over the past 2 years. And I don't think there's one social care service, I would say in Scotland, but really anywhere, that are finding it easy to recruit staff. Used to be the standard was very high, and it would be very difficult to choose. You know, you may have had 30 or 40 applications for 1 or 2 posts, and that would have made it really difficult to choose the right candidate. Now, often the people you get applying are also the people that you're actually not looking to hire. So that can be really difficult as well. I missed the start of Gary's presentation there, so I don't know if he's maybe covered some of this, but if he has, you're going to hear it again. So, but when there are so few applicants, obviously, it's difficult to find everything that you want in the one person. Hence the reason for teams, I suppose, because what you don't have in one person, you have in the other. But when you're struggling to get any new people in at all, again, that just increases your problems massively. So, and like I said, I believe that, I know it's the same in Finland. Juha was speaking to me last week and he was saying it was that there, and I have no doubt it will be like that elsewhere. I also think within Housing First, what we're looking for really is a particular kind of support worker and someone with many different skills. So these are just a few that I've highlighted here. So that passion to help the vulnerable is obviously really important. You need to be able to listen well to what others are saying. I think in particular going above and beyond is something that we expect to some degree. Our workers often have ideas and come up with solutions to things that would be perhaps a bit out of the ordinary in comparison to other support worker jobs, just because that's what's required. And to be honest, we kind of expect it as well. If we have a member of staff who's not willing to go a bit of above and beyond, they're probably not as highly thought of. Now you might say that's not right, but I'm just telling you the truth. So obviously we want someone with a positive attitude as well. They need to have the confidence and certainly the resilience to carry the job through. And I think probably most important is you need someone with a sense of humour. When things are so bad around you, often the one thing that gets you through is your sense of humour, and especially so when you're chatting to colleagues. I think black humour it's often referred to, but it does keep you going. So as you can see, all of that is a lot to look for in one person and doesn't make that recruitment any easier. So in achieving that, we do set scenarios sometimes for interviewees. In fact, probably in every interview, there is a scenario of some description. But we also use competency questions for each individual. I think sometimes maybe scenarios give you perhaps perhaps a good reflection of the individual. And certainly if there's a service user involved within the interview, it's they can usually pick that up as well. They have far more experience and it can be quite fussy about who they're going to work with or have working for them. And they can often pick up traits and personalities and and things that interviewees would discuss. Ideally, we will look for previous experience and certainly look for a positive attitude. We certainly make it clear what the different expectations are from workers. So when I was speaking a minute ago there about the going above and beyond, it is something we will talk to interviewees around. It's not something that should come as a surprise to them. So we have that discussion, letting them know what our expectations are and explaining that difference between a Housing First worker and other support workers, I think is something that's really important as well, because there are many people involved in housing support, but they wouldn't be happy or wouldn't be able to commit to Housing First support. And I think for some people who may not have quite the experience that you're looking for, sometimes you can identify a spark in somebody and and if that's there, it's worth taking the chance, and that you can then put different training into place that will help them through. The induction may take a wee bit longer, but if the spark is there and you feel it's worthwhile, well, I would go ahead with that. Enticing applicants to apply, well, sometimes that's the hard bit. You can place adverts and some adverts get no response whatsoever. It might be second or third go before you get a response, which was never the case before. So no, we're trying to think much more carefully about where we place our adverts. So we're producing posters as well as an ad on, on a job site. Obviously, it's going on to Twitter, LinkedIn, other areas, media in the media. We would also look now at posting them in strategic areas, for example, within universities or colleges and recovery communities are quite important, and obviously the social media. We try and make the poster look enticing, so and it will grab someone's interest. Any personal professional contacts you've got, share the word, just share it around. Just ask them even to send an email on your behalf with the information or containing the digital poster perhaps that you've made, and just get it out to as many people as you can. We've also in the past advertised an open Zoom meeting for those that are interested to come to, and that would be pre-application. So we'll identify a date and a time and put the link on the poster or on the job advert, and ask for anyone who's interested just to join Zoom at that time, and myself and at least one other will be there. And just to talk to them a bit more casually about what the job actually entails and what it covers. So that obviously that's something we never ever did before the pandemic. We used to have information evenings where people came along, and we did exactly the same sort of thing, but it was much more friendly and relaxed, and it was in a specific area room. We try and do the same on Zoom, but we just kind of provide teas and coffees, obviously. So yeah, I've basically covered that, what I'm saying. Just, yeah, light presentations and a bit of laughter, I think, are really, depending where our restrictions are at the moment, if you do get people together, I always think laughter is really important, helps relax people. So you also need to make your organisation attractive to applicants. So a wee example of what we do at Turning Point Scotland are, we have arrangements with retailers who will offer discounts if you work for Turning Point Scotland. Perhaps different healthcare options is something you would consider. Counselling and mental health input for your staff, I think is quite important, because staff face some really, really difficult issues on a daily basis, and can really suffer from that vicarious trauma. So very useful to have that input there available, and it's all confidential. Excuse me. The manager or anyone within the company doesn't have to know about it. You can do it by yourself. You're just given the contact details and the address when you join the company. Some other places provide extra annual leave that employees can purchase, and also condense their working hours. These are just some options. I mean, and I'm sure you will all have many as well. But just some ideas there for those perhaps that don't. And that's me, guys. So that's my details, my contact details there. I have 2 emails addressed because I have the one with the Turning Point Scotland, But I also manage the consortium, which is a group of organisations within Glasgow, which has been really successful. This is the first time it's been done, actually. So that also gives you a bigger pool of staff, because you can take staff from, have staff seconded from different organisations. So it does expand your area. So that's me, folks.
Thank you very much, Liz. That's great. Really, really informative. And thanks to all the panelists. There's a couple of questions coming in that I'm going to put to all three of you. So whoever wants to answer first can do so. Do wages play a factor in recruiting staff and getting staff on board?
Yeah,
Gary.
Yeah, I think we have to be honest. I think they do. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do at Rock Trust is make sure that we're competitive. And so we will regularly benchmark our salaries against similar organisations. That used to be something that we did on a sort of cyclical basis, maybe biannually, but we've agreed more recently, just with some of the challenges we've heard, that we probably need to just review that on a needs basis, really. And so I think probably if we feel it's going to be an issue, we'll do that before we go out to recruitment. But we've always made sure that we're competitive, but that has its own challenges when it comes to funding and being competitive. But yes, it does matter. But a lot of the benefits Liz mentioned are equally as important to staff. We've actually recently had a student come in and do their dissertation on non-financial rewards at Rock Trust. And actually the thing that came through most powerfully from staff was they all want to be paid and financially rewarded, but the non-financial rewards are much more important. And that's not even the perks, actually. It's the ability to be able to go out and do such meaningful work. And so I think we need to put everything in the mix.
Very good, thank you, Gary. Liz, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, Neil, I would just say I can only agree with Gary, really. We certainly try and be competitive with salaries. We are not the highest paid, but we're certainly nowhere near the lowest either. So, you know, you can only do what you can with what you've got, if that makes sense. But yeah, competitiveness is important. We've also been quite fortunate in Scotland in that the Scottish Government have made, some decisions to social care. And again, that was due to the pandemic, and raised some of the income levels. So, or instructed organisations to raise incomes. So, but yeah, that's worked out better as well. But yeah, certainly I think it is important to getting people over the door, you know.
Thanks, Liz. Antii, do you want to come in on that one?
I do agree. I think we have the same kind of salaries with the similar organizations here in Finland. Maybe there is little changes, but it's about the salary, it's about the values of the organization. It is a big thing, the whole thing. How about the healthcare of the organization? But good reputation is very good sign for if we treat our employees well, they are speaking everywhere about that, and yeah, I hope people want to work over here and in Salvation Army. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Liz, this next question is directed to yourself in relation to the consortium, and you mentioned the secondment of staff. Is there ever a values issue with staff from different agencies or different organizations coming to work as a group or as a team? You're on mute. Sorry, Liz. Those famous Zoom words. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think there could be if you didn't choose your organisations carefully. But one of the things I think in becoming a consortium is that you need to choose carefully the organisation that you are going to pair up with, or triple up with, or 4Es, you know, however many you have. So, and it's important that they do have the same values. So we have we've signed Community Weekly Care, Salvation Army, Turning Point. So we have four different agencies in our consortium. And before we all joined up, basically we all made sure that we worked from the same values for the same outcomes. The only thing that is different probably are the administrative duties that people do. But once they come in, they do hours because I'm their manager, so they need to follow what I say. But in every other way, it's, it works great. It does work really, really well.
Okay, thanks, Liz, for that clarity, because I think sometimes it can seem like there's a lot of different personalities and different organizational values that come together. The next one is a question on advice, really. How do you start involving young people or tenants in the interview process? If you're an organization that's never done it, how do you take the leap? What advice or guidance from Gary or Antii would you put in place for organizations who've never done it? Gary, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly if there's any organizations in Scotland who are looking to, in fact, anywhere, we've got the means to do things virtually now. Another organisation who works with young people can provide some young people. We set up a project in Perth a few years ago, and we didn't have any other services in Perth or anywhere really nearby. And so we linked in with a youth organisation in Perth, and they were fantastic young people who travelled down from Perth on the train to sit in on our interviews. And they were fantastic, but I think it was important that we had young people from Perth because they knew what things were like in that part of the country. I think if we'd used young people from our Edinburgh services, it wouldn't have had the same impact because that was really important. So yeah, like ask for help from other youth providers, I would say.
Thanks, Gary. Antii, do you have any advice for organizations?
Please, what was the question?
Question was for an organization who has never involved customers or young people or tenants on interviews for staff, how do they start?
With courage. Try to, of course, because you really have to, nowadays it's difficult to get employees, for example. You have to try every kind of ways to get good employees, and of course youngs and olders and everyone, or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Antii. The next question I have is in relation to temporary contracts. A question came in and said that sometimes commission timelines will only allow for specified purpose or for time-bound contracts for staff. And does that impact the recruitment of staff? And have any of you guys seen it in your organizations? Liz, thank you.
Okay, just to say that I'm not on mute, am I? No.
No, you're not, no.
Right, okay. Sorry, get paranoid. We've had several of those discussions, and we took the decision in the consortium not to offer temporary contracts. Our offers would be for permanent positions, and if and when the end stage came for the service, the attempt would be made to take the people elsewhere into the organisation. And because there's a staff shortage, there's always going to be places for people. So that's how we've dealt with it, because we felt especially the short-term contracts they're not really of any interest to people.
I agree. Gary or Antii, would you like to come in? Gary has his hand up. Right.
Thanks, Niall. Yes is the short answer, but I can't quite bite my tongue. I think yes, because for all the reasons that Liz says, it's important that staff have got some kind of security, but more important than anything else is the participants at Housing First. I can't see how anyone can look at Housing First and the principles and equate how we can stick to the fidelity of Housing First if we can offer Housing First participants that continuity, that security, that long-standing relationship. So I guess it's a call to arms. We need to all stand together and hold commissioners and decision makers' feet to the fire and really drive that home, that point that it's, at the end of the day, it's about the Housing First participants. And if we're not getting it right for them, why are we bothering?
I agree. And to add to that, just from my own personal experience, the tendering process sometimes can add to that uncertainty for staff and for that relationship with Housing First participants and the staff engaging with them. So that's a very good point. We don't have any more questions coming in. So before I hand back to Samara to finish up, I suppose just a couple of things that struck me in relation to all of the presentations, and that is that we need to use a good dose of common sense, and we can use I suppose the practical things that don't cost a lot of money. And what particularly struck me were the welcome cards for somebody joining that will ground somebody in an organization and just, you know, put them on the right path. And also, I think, was it Gary or Liz mentioned the bios. Someone coming to a new team, let people know who they are. What team are you joining? Who are you? Who's your teammates? So really simple things that don't cost a lot of money that can enhance the experience for new staff members. So they're my takeaway thoughts. And I suppose if anyone has any questions, the details or the contact details for Gary, Liz, and for Antii are available, and you can contact them directly. And I suppose I just want to say thank you to Antii Martikainen, to Liz Litter, and to Gary Niall for their presentations. It was really good. So thank you. I'll hand back to Samara now.
Well, and it's my turn to thank you, Niall, for so efficiently and intelligently hosting the session. I think, yeah, it was really great that we could touch on this, because we know a lot of people are facing these same issues in their own organizations. And I think, yeah, everybody offered something, little things that can be easily adapted into what you're already doing without sort of needing to change dramatically all of your recruitment processes. And I think those are excellent tips. And it's about, yeah, showing how welcoming and rewarding the work can be without hitting people over the head with it. But I learned a lot. So thank you, everyone. Maybe I'll just take one more last minute to say that this is an ongoing series, and particularly for people participating, if there are issues or topics that you would like us to touch on, please drop us a line. Let us know, is there something you think you'd like to hear a session on, or you'd like to contribute yourself? This is really an open and informal network with you. So please feel free to let us know what you're looking to hear about next. So thanks, everybody. And as I mentioned before, we're organizing our conference in end of March, so check out our website for that. And thanks to Matilde for all the behind the scenes magic and making this happen, and to Juha and Taina, who are also somewhere behind the scenes there. So thanks, everybody.